The pulse on the broad-based government. Is it unity or political convenience? Joining us this morning is Professor Gitile Naituli, I beg your pardon, who is a former NCIC commissioner and fellow of the Kenya National Academy of Science. Prof, good morning.
Morning.
How are you doing?
Good, doing well.
Karibu sana.
Asante.
Good to have you here this morning. It's good that we can have you at this hour. You were shocked by Monday morning traffic.
Yeah. I didn't know it's like that. Langata Road. I woke up at 6. And the traffic had already piled up.
Had done its thing. Well, look, it's good that you can be here at this time because, you know, the issues that we discuss are not bound by time.
Yes.
Dennis is going to share with you today's proverb. He'll tell you where it's from, and then you can give us your interpretation of it. Right.
So the country that you're in is in the East Africa region, and it's a country that has never been colonized. Consider itself as the birthplace of coffee. And not just that, there's a young girl in that country called Lucy. But Lucy is a 3.2 million years old fossil, and it's considered to be the cradle of mankind. So that country is also known as Ethiopia. We continue to fight over our athletes and these medals every Olympic period, but that's just competition within the region. And the proverb today, when the spider webs unite, they can tie up a lion. When the spider webs unite, they can tie up a lion. What do you make of that?
Well, that is a beautiful proverb, and just shows you the power of organization. If people are united, they're invincible, basically.
Yeah.
So that basically what it means. You see, if you look at the African colonization, it was because we are not united, we are not one entity. So that is why the Muzungu was able to penetrate here. And I think we have also remained ineffective in international affairs and everywhere because we are still small little countries and we are not negotiating with the international community as one solid block. And that is the problem. Same thing here. You have been colonized by the Africans because you did not really get independence.
Yeah.
You got the black skin to replace the white skin. The only president you could claim was a Kenyan was Kibaki because you are again in your tribal cocoons.
Yeah.
You are not together. So you are not able to tie a lion.
Okay. Well, that's interesting because I think we can make that comparison to exactly what our conversation is about this morning, because here we are saying that we were not together and you're actually not going to be able to tie a lion. There's this phenomenon, and I'm going to call it a phenomenon because we're still yet to figure it out. It's the broad-based government that came about after the Gen Z protests that, I guess incidentally, we are a year to the memory of that from last year. So the broad-based government was formed. In our minds, it was the panacea to these problems that brought about the protests. Or that's what we were told. And that people who were from the opposition were then co-opted into government. Some were made, cabinet secretaries. And then there was an agenda. Was it an agenda? It was an agreement or something which was brought about, and they said, well, this is how we are going to actually run the country going forward, and this is what we are going to do to ensure that there is no drama. As if we were in my neck of the woods, we would say wahala. And then that formed. And no sooner had it formed than we started to ask ourselves questions. And even those within the corridors of the dark rooms where this broad-based agenda was signed started to ask themselves questions. And we said, what is this actually for? And if it was for the unification, the tying of the strings of the lion in Kenya, wouldn't we be able to see the results of it much faster than we have? And already it seems as though the strings around this tying of the lion have started to fall apart. And so we want to ask the question today and point us in the direction that, is the broad-based government actually fulfilling what it was meant to fulfill in the light of the protest that took place last year, and what can we expect moving forward? You laugh, Professor. Why?
I laugh because the so-called broad-based government did not come into existence so that they can do good for Kenya. It came into existence so that it can facilitate the exploitation of the Kenyans by their own state, by their own government. It's not the first time that the political elite has come together in order to save themselves basically from the changes which may come. So you have to remember that there was in Gitile LNDP or something, which united with the Kano, and then there was the Kibaki, whatever it became. Then there was the Uhuru handshake. This is when the Kenyans need to wake up and understand. You see, they gave Raila the job of being the opposition chief. Raila has never been an opposition leader. Raila always uses the method of entering in government. And I believe he also avoids winning because I think he likes the privilege of government without responsibility. So what he did, he took the opportunity of the Gen Z. Remember, Ruto had refused. There was Raila demonstrations, which killed over 70 people.
Which the Mandamano?
Yeah, there was Raila Mandamanos before the Gen Z.
The
Sufuria revolution.
Yeah.
That one failed because Ruto actually resisted it. Okay? He resisted and he wanted to run his government the way he wanted. But then Raila Odinga took advantage of the Gen Zs because the Gen Zs weakened the president considerably. So he jumped in. Now he didn't jump in to change anything because otherwise things would have changed. I mean, the president promised to have advisors. He promised to have a small government, a leaning government, like the way the Gen Zs wanted. You see, the Gen Zs wanted a government that works for them. But that did not happen. So if they went there, so that then the government become responsive to the people of Kenya, that wouldn't have happened.
But did it? So, and I think I'm asking the question that a lot of people are asking today. So let's pose it here. That it reminds me of a story that I read once when somebody went into the operating theater because she knew that what she was going for was an appendectomy. They were going to remove her appendix. She came out of the surgery without one leg. They had amputated her leg.
Yes.
And that, for me, is what this broad-based government did. That it applied a solution for which the problem was not resonating. That this broad-based government that was formed was not the solution to the problems that Kenyans have been crying for in the previously.
On air, I'll call you.
Reality radio.
Why not? We are here, so let's just go.
Yes.
They are probably watching you on TV and think that they can tell you a thing or two without realizing
Maybe they're laughing where they are, like, oh, you see, he picked his phone.
He picked up his phone, so we can do it anytime. No problem.
Yes.
So my question was it really the solution to the problem that was being faced? Because we saw protests happen on the 25th of June, and in less than a month, or around a month later, we saw a broad-based government being formed. And for me, it's the lady with appendicitis who comes out of surgery without a leg.
I agree with you completely. I think that the best description you can give to what happened. What happens in normal society is people listen at the grievances. Then they address them. What was the grievances? The grievances was good governance, devoid of corruption. And governance that is responsive to people's needs. Okay? Now, a governance that is transparent, that is practices integrity in management of public affairs, and that is accountable. So that is very simple to implement. That should have been very simple. But we have taken public service as a country, going into government as a way of making yourself rich. Government is a business. You see, we have taken government, instead of being a public service, we have taken it as a business. So when they went there, they went to do business. They didn't go to govern. Okay? In fact, there is a difference. You see, most people, when they go to government, maybe except Kibaki government, their idea, other than governing, is actually owning Kenya. There is a difference between governing and owning a country. So we are driven by desire to own the country, not to run it. So that's what happens. That's why I like your description, that they went for a small thing. But then from the surgery came out with missing one leg. Because these people, and they listen to these young people. You see, the young people want to succeed at home. Not abroad. So you can't sell people jobs abroad. you are selling slavery. Just the same way the chiefs of the Yo you to sell us into slavery to the Arabs or to the Mzungu. So now, instead of listening to these young people, understanding them and understanding that what they need is a government that works for them, that creates jobs at home, that invests in education, that invests in health, they went for tenders, they went for 20%, and that is why you see the budgeting. I mean, I'm just seeing in the newspaper here, another 80 million. The money that has been put in the State House under William Ruto could have built a brand new State House. But you see now, this is what we are, in the age of budget and corruption. And that's what these young people are trying. Because you see, this country is very strong. The moment this country gets another Kibaki, it will take off just like it took off under Kibaki. It will. So, and that's why Kenyans need to avoid the politicians. Because the politicians have no soul. You know, there is a book by a Polish author which says that half of the people you see on the planet may be dead, but they are walking. Because he says that you acquire the soul in the first 18 months of your life. What does that mean? That means that if you have the soul, you feel shame. You feel empathy. You know, empathy, kindness. You respond to people. So the problem is that most of these politicians have no soul. They can't feel. Okay? They can't feel shame. You see, what makes you human is the ability to feel shame, is the ability to cry when hurt, and the ability to laugh when happy. The political class is not able to do that.
So, Prof, as we talk about these issues to do with the broad-based government, they got into place with regard to a 10-point agenda that they wanted to implement. And if you look at the scorecard today with regard to the 10-point agenda, including implementation of NADCO report, where are we with that 0? Talk about cost of living relief and youth employment solutions. Still, the youth are crying and employment rates continue to go up. Talk about tackling graft. One would say it's actually getting even graftier, if that's a word to use. And as we sit here and look at these political arrangements that come into place, one would say it is all about me, Wakenya watajitetea. But how do we get out of that as Kenyans?
Well, I think we will. One thing I'm very happy about this generation, our children don't want to get into our culture. We have created an evil culture, a hit money society, and the children are saying that's not sustainable. That's not how our world is. So out of these young people, we are going to get an Ibrahim Traore. We are going to get a savior from this young generation. This generation you are calling Gen Z, probably plus the millennials. We are going to get away from this culture of basically extraction. You see, you have a government that is colonial in nature. And it's not just the Ruto government, to be fair to William Ruto. It is the government of Kenya. You see, a government has a consciousness like an individual. Okay? So the Mzungu, the colonial state, was an extractive state, taking from you. Okay? When Kenyatta one came, he continued the extraction. Okay? And then we have continued the extraction until Kibaki comes, put some brake on it. Because I arguably Kibaki is the first president of Kenya. Okay?
Sorry?
Kibaki arguably has to be the first president of Kenya. Okay? And then Uhuru comes and it goes full blast to extraction. So what you're having now is just Jubilee phase 2. I mean, I don't know how much difference. People may think there is a big difference between Uhuru Kenyatta administration and William Ruto. The only difference is this one is more excessive in terms of corruption than the other one. The other one was like controlled corruption where maybe a few people do it. But this one is laissez-faire. Everybody who has a position Masistiro.
That would be the requirement for you to remain.
That is the only difference. Otherwise, this is just Jubilee phase 2.
Professor, during your time at NCIC, how would you rate where Kenya is today compared to where you are at the time when you are at NCIC?
I think at that time there was high level degree of calmness in the country. There was hope. You see, when there is hope of a better tomorrow, people usually work, they invest, they educate their children because they know tomorrow will be better. Right now, there is a lot of hopelessness. And the hopelessness is dangerous because the moment the people feel that they have nothing to lose, then they can go violence. But the major difference I foresee, though, is Kenyans are more united now, trust me, than they were when we entered that office, NCIC. Not because of NCIC, because the Kenyans has been growing together organically. You see, when I go home and they find the Kalenjins owning saloons in Imero, I'm impressed and I'm happy. And when you go to Kitengela or Turungai, and you find a Kalenjin washing cars. You see, in 2007, there was no Kalenjins in any town in Kenya. And that probably facilitated the problem that we entered into. Right now, I can tell if anybody is planning to use any tribe to cause chaos, they will be disappointed. Tumeungana vizuri sana. Tumeungana very nicely. In fact, any politician who come to you and tells you it's the agenda to unite Kenya, run away from that one.
Okay.
That is the danger. That a pleasure is dangerous to Kenya. The Kenya is very united.
So this tribal issue, which by the way finds its way into this broad-based government agenda in not so many flowery a word, essentially comes to that there will be, the development across the country. We see this, and we have heard in the last couple of days, I believe it was even a news bite this morning, where it was said very clearly that, we will, I think it was you who read it, Dennis, you said that, Okari, that we support the government at this point until development in our area then is complete. Then our real political affiliations will come out. Is that a tribal leaning, or are we just saying that there are certain regions who have said, you know what, now that our person is inside there, let us get what we can get, and then we leave the rest for later? Is that what is actually happening now?
That's a fallacious statement.
Okay.
Because that's not happening.
It's been said many times.
Of course.
We saw the governor for Siaya County refuse vehemently to have a conversation. In fact, even advised Raila Odinga against this position. But then a few weeks later, we saw him in State House.
Well, yes. But that doesn't take away what he really said. We devolved resources to avoid the concentration of power on the presidency. So you can't... And that undermines devolution, actually.
It does.
You can't come to tell us you have to be friend to the president in order to attract the development to your home area, because once the government is formed, it becomes the government of the Republic of Kenya, responsible for every small facet of this republic. So that's a wrong argument. It's a very wrong argument, because also, where are you going to get the development? Where are you going to get the money that is not in the budget? Because the moment you budget,
State House.
Parliament, through state. You see, that is where the fallacy really comes in here. Because State House doesn't have its own money. The money must be budgeted. The road identified, or the boho identified, or the school identified by name and by location, and they put in the budget. That's the only way the controller on budget is supposed to authorize withdrawal. Because it's illegal. It's in the budget. So what is this thing that the president is having is supposed to bring into your home, which you didn't put through the budgetary process? Orengo has remained a very staunch constitutionalist. He believes in the Constitution of Kenya. And that's why he was insisting that what we are doing here is undermining the constitution and undermining democracy and undermining devolution.
So, Prof, if you look at the ongoing in the country, there's a lot that has been said, the status of the country, and one would hope that the broad-based government expanding it further would have brought different minds to help the government move forward. But we look at healthcare on its deathbed. Look at education, we're having problems. Look at police and the brutality that continues to be meted on Kenyans. It is a problem. Look at how funds, taxpayers' money is being spent. There is a problem when it comes to accountability. Look at even how leaders are speaking to Kenyans themselves. There is a problem. And the Gen Zs, as they would say out here, hii ni system ya majambazi, and they're really tired about all this. So is this broad-based government really going to bring any change, if at all any?
First of all, there is really no such thing as broad-based government.
Okay.
You are basically giving something the wrong name. What you have is a government, is a coalition, UNDA and UNDM. Okay? These are the fellows they took, I think, from Central Kenya. Have you ever heard them speak? Do you think they are in that government?
Maybe they are seriously working.
Yeah.
No, I don't know, but they are there. So I'm broad-based in government would have been like a government that goes and looks for Professor Kibotha Kibwana. Because he has proved performer without taking anybody's money, without stealing our money. It is a government that would have gone and look for Natembea.
They looked
for interior.
Makao Mutua.
Okay, for interior, for example, because that fellow with the security, you can trust that he will protect us.
Yeah.
In other ones, is a government that would have looked for real Kenyans. Okay? But it's a government looked for people whose agenda is to eat you. Is to feed on you. Not to serve you. People, you see, remember, we have converted government into business.
Yeah.
It's people went from business. That is why all what you have said has not happened. That's why those who didn't have jobs before the broad-based government was formed still don't have jobs. That's why the hospitals which didn't have drugs before it was formed, they still don't have drugs. That is why the schools, those children you have seen in Imbaringo and other places under trees, they are still under trees. You understand? This is why the police, which I think we need to dismantle and dissolve or abolish the police in this country. We need to abolish completely and devolve it. Okay? I mean, we abolish it and devolve it American style, so that they can become under the governors, the county governors. Yeah, we just need to dissolve because we are not able to reform the police. You see, again in the colonial mind, the APs under the colonial state were supposed to extract taxes from you, from the Africans. So in their mind, when they see you, they just see an enemy. They don't see a person who deserves to be served. Then the regular police was about to protect the Muzungu. They are now protecting the rich Kenyans. So when they see a poor fellow down there, they have seen an enemy. The curriculum, the Muzungu curriculum, we are not able to change it. So we need a radical surgery.
Let me help you with this.
We need radical surgery. Okay? And the radical surgery means the approach right now should be just dissolve the police. And the other thing also is we need to stop. We have enough graduates. Honestly, we need to stop hiring people within this to the police. Because you see, examinations at lower levels don't necessarily measure your intelligence. They measure your ability to make a decision. That's why some of those questions, any of them could actually be right. But you are supposed to make a decision which one comes closely to what you are being asked. So with all the graduates we have, why are we trusting our lives with the least qualified citizens to protect us? I mean, being a police in other countries, you can't be a policeman without a law degree.
That is very true.
Or a retired military officer. So why are we still perpetuating this business that mtoto wake akianguka all the exams, you go to the police commission and say, could you please employ my son or my daughter? Okay, these people can do something else better than policing. We need, with the graduate we have, we need to stop hiring D's and D minuses.
Professor Gitile Naituli is our guest this hour, and we're looking into the pulse of the broad-based government. Was it just unity, or was it political convenience? And so we're asking the questions. If you're diseased, the symptoms will show you. The symptoms seem to be popping up here that perhaps this was not the solution. It's been a year of it, more or less a year of the broad-based government, and one must ask, it's almost ironical, but the number one agenda, the number one point on this broad-based government agenda was that there was going to be a halting of these extrajudicial killings, of these kidnappings and forced disappearances. But it would appear that since then there have been more of those happening than there were at the time when the agreement was signed. So then those are some, because we went for the break and we're talking about when you have a disease, there'll be symptoms. You'll have a headache. There'll be something to point to that the doctor now wants to go back and check and say, what's going on here? The symptoms are popping up all over the place. It is a time where education out the window, medical health, we don't even know what's going on with that. We were told 250,000 houses would be sorted out, and that they were putting people in place to ensure. The Treasury was having a problem. He said this person that he has put in now sorting out issues. Education, crazy. And then also we were told that there's nothing that people were not told. But I just thought it was ironical that the number one thing on that agenda is one that people are still crying about to date. In the last 2 weeks, how many people have been shot, killed, strangled? In 2 weeks, more than 2. This has happened. So was it really a solution?
No, it can never be a solution, and it's unfortunate that the government that is supposed to protect, because the government is formed to protect life and the property. It is not doing that. It's very unfortunate. I think most people in this government are living in the 1970s, 1980s, probably early 90s. That time, information was very scarce. There was only the KBC. Now, anything happens in 1 second is everywhere. That means you can't zero fear. It's not possible. You see, fear is owned in a controlled environment. This environment is not controlled. So I think the government need to change. They need to very seriously live by the law. Article 37 gives the Kenyans right to petition, to picket, unarmed and peaceable. And then the work of government now should be to protect that right. Okay? Because also the right and the bureau right are supposed to be given by God, not by government. So I agree with you, nothing changed. If these people went there, the Raila Odinga and the company, to the government, and that was one agenda number one, according to Sifuna, they could have stopped that, right? But they didn't stop it. Like I said, meaning that was, they were simply finding an entry into government, but they didn't go there so that they can have a good government. But what I don't understand is, any government should want to be re-elected. And therefore, for you to be elected, then you need to do the right thing. You need to protect the people and their property. But that doesn't seem to be a priority here. I mean, we saw that guy who just to Angani openly under cameras, because this impunity is, we have really made it a culture. That is why the next government, it must put an end to impunity. It must really put an end to impunity. And I believe this is also where Kibaki failed. Because Kibaki gone after people committing the crimes, even though I can argue that there is no statute of limitation on crimes, okay? It does not exist. Meaning that the people who are doing it, they need to know that they will be held accountable, whether tomorrow or even 80 years from now. You know, we saw people being tried when they are 90 years for the crime they committed during the Nazi Germany. Okay? So even here, it can really happen. It's unfortunate that we don't have that commitment to have a good society, to have a caring society, to have a society that protects, okay? To have a society that governs for posterity. It's unfortunate that we don't have Kenyans who want to be remembered the way we remember Jesus for opposing an eye for an eye, for opposing very bad things that the religion was doing at that time, okay? For insisting that let's love and let's neutralize hate with love.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate that we don't have leaders like that. That's why it's saying Jesus is immortalized. Whereas Caesar, who died in a palace, nobody remembers him. You understand?
Except for taxes.
Yes, except for taxes. So it's unfortunate that we don't have leaders who really want to be immortalized as the people who built a beautiful country, who took care of Kenya as a country. It's very unfortunate we have not been able to produce a Nyerere. We are not being able to produce a Mandela. We are not being able to produce a Captain Sankara or Traore. We should ask ourselves what went wrong. You see, the British, when they came here, they took three things from us. They took land, they took our freedom, and they took our culture. Okay? When they left, they returned the land. Even the freedom marginally was also returned. But they went with the culture. Okay? So we are neither Africans, neither are we Europeans, because the Europeans respect the law.
Yeah.
We don't respect the law. We have the law in the book, fine. But we don't feel it's part of us. We need the leadership that is constitutional, that follows the rule of law. Because once you follow the rule of law, everything falls in place. Everything.
But Prof, how do we follow the rule or the constitution? Because we have one of the best constitutions in the world.
Yeah.
But it almost appears the political class operate under a different playbook. So you're saying what was taken is our culture, and why can't we produce a Nyerere? Why can't we produce a Sankara? How then do we marry these two, where you have culture, you follow the rule of law, and you follow the constitution? Because there's a big disconnect, and this keeps happening every election cycle. And let me circle my question to the power sharing pact. We've witnessed in this country, power sharing never survives a full electoral cycle. But it almost appears after every election, we go back to that same playbook. So it is the incoming government that has to look for the opposition, work together, give it a name. We started with a handshake, BBI, gave birth to BBI, now we are broad-based government. So it seems the target here really is make sure you get into government, then by extension make sure you take on board the opposition. So you neutralize all the checks and balances. How do we stop this culture?
We stop that culture by an overwhelming desire of an individual to work for Kenya and not the self. You see, the moment you enter government to work for yourself, then you have no agenda other than that one. But if you have an agenda for Kenya, whether you are in opposition or in government, if you're in opposition and you have an agenda for Kenya, you will wait for the next election. But if you have an agenda for yourself, you will do anything possible to enter government, because we have made government business. We have made government for profit. We have made government for self-aggrandizement. So the moment we depart from that and make public service what it truly is, a sacrifice, then this in this cycle we are now used to, it will disappear overnight. Once it becomes public service, it becomes what is supposed to be, service to the people.
Yeah.
Then what we are talking about now will not be relevant. But as long as government is a place where you get rich, you see, the people in Kenya who are rich, they either worked with the government or trained with the government. Okay? We don't have somebody who invented anything here. You see, if you invented a bottle like this and you sold it and it became rich, then you have added value to society. But all the rich people are the people in government or who have threatened with government. So that what we must depart from. We must move away from government being a place where you go to get rich to becoming a place where you go to serve.
But where did we see the opposite of that? Because it had to have started somewhere. That one would have imagined that because that's what we see. We see somebody successful today and we say, okay, well, Dennis, you've made accolades. The next thing that we prescribe for them is that, why don't you run for a particular seat? Or if you've attained some kind of, social acclaim, then somebody says, oh, the next thing you want to be a member of parliament, then you keep rising. You want to do something like that. Where did we get the idea that when you go into government, that is the place then for you to be able to get rich, as opposed to the opposite?
We have seen it since independence. You see, since the Muzungu was here actually to aggrandize. He had no business, didn't care about you. So the government that came in, he couldn't have departed from that. Okay? It didn't. They continued the Muzungu mentality of extraction. So this is where we got it. Now it has become a culture. You understand? When do you think somebody will leave parliament and become a minister? You understand? If the service, are you not serving as a parliamentarians?
Yes.
But when you go become a minister, you have now access to 20% if the road is being built. You have access to corruption. Somebody told me, a friend of mine, actually it's my cousin. A friend of his was made a minister. So they went to Dubai. He was in the lobby receiving deposits. People bribe you in advance, in anticipation of licenses. Do you understand? Whether it's mining license, whether it's importation, sugar import or rice import, they bribe you in advance. It is that culture that needs to be dismantled so that we can go into the culture of service. Culture where unajitolea to serve. Okay? That culture, it is not there. If you look at the African culture, the leaders serve the people. The African leaders serve people. You see, the biggest problem here where it originated was when the Europeans came here. The real Africans who are under heart, because your capacity to love, you have to get it from your parents. Okay? These Africans who are overthrown, who is in power today is basically people of very dubious backgrounds. If you go and look at them, it's not the proper Africans. Okay? The Mobutu Sesekos, the Idi Amin. Yeah, these people can even trace their family, most of them. The people who you can trace parentage properly, they became wonderful Africans. Nyerere, Mandela. Okay? All the others were people very dubious background. Now, when society it's changed like that, now the reason was very simple. When the Muzungu came here, he came with his religion, which is his culture, which people went to church. These were the underclass. Okay? The people who are not really respectable in society. They are the ones who easily went to church. They are the ones who got education. They are the ones who took the reins of power when the Muzungu left. These are people who didn't have capacity to love. Because the Bible says you can't give what you don't have. What can you give to society? You can give them love. You can give your commitment. But what if you don't have that? And where are you supposed to get that? You are supposed to get it from loving parents. Do you understand? For long, go and do research on your leaders. You'll be shocked where they came from.
But Prof, we might blame history, but we've had elections where people have actually gone beyond tribal lines, for example, beyond some of these people with questionable characters and backgrounds, and people at some point agitated for, we want young leaders. Yet, these same young leaders who are currently in parliament, the quality of debates in the National Assembly is questionable. These same young people who are in positions of power are the same people who have taken over what was already established.
Yes.
In his book, It's Our Turn to Eat, 2009, Michela talked about these things, how graft was so deep-rooted and was so systemic. And one of the things that that has always played out when you look at government, its composition in terms of positions, voting blocks, is the question of ethnicity and how it's used as a currency by these politicians. So no matter who you place and say this person has no dirty background, but just because of that, we still go back.
You know, I'm going to surprise you. There is no tribalist in this country in leadership. Okay? A tribalist, a real tribalist, is somebody who loves his community, right? If you love your community, you have the capacity to love us. The politicians use the tribe to protect their theft and to keep you independent. Okay? So that they can continue basically eating you. They can continue living. Yes. Because look here, why is the tribalism? If you go right now in this town and you want to look an apartment to live in, do you go and find who lives there before you rent? You simply go and look for space.
Yes.
And you rent and occupy. Why? Because you trust the rest of the Kenyans.
Yes.
You don't care who is there, is your brother, is your sister. Do you understand? If you were tribal, you would find apartment blocks occupied by only one community. We are not tribal. What we are segregated economically. You are in Madare because of your economic situation, not because of your tribe. You are in Ikebera because of your economic situation, not your tribe. You are in Karen because of your economic situation, not your tribe. It is the economy which is segregated, but the politician have put the tribe on you. Do you understand? They have put the tribe on you, and unfortunately, the political class continues with that, disregarding the fact that in down here, we don't have a tribe. I mean, you ask my students in class who they live with because they share rooms in order to afford the rent, okay? They live with every Kenyan European. They live.
Doesn't matter.
You are not going to find actually very rare, and you find somebody who is sharing a room with somebody from his tribe.
Yes.
They share across the country. So there is no such thing as tribalism in this country. Tribalism is in the leaders. And when they talk about uniting Kenya, they are talking about uniting themselves so they can rob Kenya. Okay? It is basically a method by gangsters of continuing to rob the country. And then they talk about tribalism. Because I don't see it where we have a minister from Meru, right? I've never been into his house. I've never taken his cup of tea. But I walk to my neighbors from anywhere in this country and have a cup of tea, or we chat. We are friends. We are together if there is any issue. So this tribal thing is only on the leaders, and is about continuing the political class continuing to dominate you. It's a domination strategy. It has nothing to do with the Kenyans themselves.
That's a good point, and a place for us to open our eyes this morning, I think, just from what you're saying. Take it all and interrogate it and see where it's all coming from. So I guess the very clear answer to that is that this broad-based government, from your position, is not the answer to these issues that Kenyans face.
No, they did not address them. We could have, but you see, that's why I'm saying that the people need to be very careful. Raila Odinga has fooled Kenyans for very long. In fact, he has fooled me for very long, because I supported him in 2017 when I was working for Uhuru Kenyatta, because I actually believed he means good for Kenya. That's why I supported him. But Raila has never, and let me say this, never meant good for this country. He is a very selfish individual who looks only for himself. You see, which election does Raila not get the people killed, then go behind them and enter government? Which one? Do you understand? He does not even ask for compensation for these people. Okay? Now, I also believe that he actually makes himself lose election.
Oh, God. We could get into that.
Because he doesn't want to be president. You see, the last election, for example, who advised him not to have agents anywhere? The law requires that you have agents in the polling station and in the constituency telling. So he never had any. Why? 2017, when the court ruled that the election starts and ends at the polling station, and they give him a second chance, instead of utilizing that court ruling and become president, he boycotted the election. So every time Raila says that he's going to win an election, he deliberately loses it, so that he can then organize demonstrations. Kenyans get killed, then he goes in behind them, negotiate a handshake, and enters government alone.
Those are the opinions of one Professor Gitile Naituli, and he shared them this morning as we close out the Situation Room this morning. Interesting ones. I wish you'd have started with that, but okay. Our time runs out, but we want to thank you for being here in the room this morning. Things to think about and to mull over as we get into the coming weeks. Asante Sana.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.